In this video, we're going to cover advanced concepts of vocal bridges. But first, I'd like to go over some of the concepts we've covered so far. We talked about how the voice produces complex sound waves with multiple harmonics, multiple frequencies. It's very much like there's a complex chord coming from our vocal cords. These partials or harmonics are closer together on lower pitches and they're further apart on higher. And that's important because we need to amplify or boost harmonics. When they're closer together, they're easier to hit. When they're further apart, they're harder to hit. The harmonics are boosted by our two resonators, the throat and the mouth. The boosting value of the acoustic space, or the resonator, is called a formant. We control the formants through the vowel. When we change vowels, or when we change even shades of a vowel, we're changing the formants. And a vowel is a combination of two formants, a formant supplied by the throat and a formant supplied by the mouth. We call those F1 and F2. Let's first look at chest voice. What is it? Chest voice is F1 dominant. In other words, the first formant that's supplied by the throat is giving most of the power boost in the sound. F2 is still present. You need both formants to have a vowel. You need both power boosts, as it were, boosting a certain harmonic. But in chest, more of that energy is coming from F1. More of that energy is coming from the throat. Now, when we're there, what we want to do is we want to take F1, or our throat resonator, and we want to tune it to a relatively high harmonic. Now remember, the harmonics are quite close together. So it's not that they're taking great skips when we're tuning to a higher harmonic. However, if we tune to one of the lower harmonics, the first few, the sound is going to be so dull and weak that it's not going to do much good for us as singers unless we want that as an effect. And picking this low harmonic will cause weak vocal cord closure. In other words, the cords need to stay together a certain amount of time against the building air pressure in order to create that sound wave. The less time they stay closed before they open, the weaker the intensity of the sound wave. The more time that they stay together before they open, the greater pressure and intensity builds, and therefore you have a more energized initial sound wave. There's more power in it. The harmonics actually affect the chord's ability to stay closed. They energize each other. It's very funny, but a low harmonic, because it goes quite slowly, causes the chord cycle to not be able to stay together as long. A higher harmonic is more energized and it enables the chords to stay closed longer in the feedback of energy that the harmonic provides. For example, if I do a very dull sound, if I tune to a relatively low harmonic, I will have a hard time trying to get volume. If I take an E sound and make what some people will call dopey or hooty, try as I might, I can't get more chord closure on that. Now, if I adjust the E to get more energy, what I've done is I had to raise my formant, raise my larynx, which raised the value of the first formant, and it went on to a higher harmonic. That gave me more energy. You can see it here in Voce Vista. So this is a relatively low note in the male voice. And you can see that this first one here is the fundamental, or H1, the first harmonic. And most of the energy is on 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth harmonic is the loudest. So the first formant has been raised to the level where it is meeting the fifth harmonic, and that's going to give much more energy to the voice. This fifth harmonic is over 2 octaves higher than the fundamental, so it has much more energy. F1 moves down the harmonic order as the pitch rises. What this means is on this low note, we are boosting the fifth harmonic. Basses will boost harmonics as high as the eighth harmonic in order to give energy on their very low notes. As you begin to ascend in pitch, that harmonic will rise as well. It'll rise with the fundamental pitch. And what will happen is those harmonics will move out of the range of the first formant. Your first formant basically acts as a bass resonator. So at a certain point, that harmonic's going to move out of where the first formant is really efficient. What then happens is the next harmonic down is then boosted by the first formant. So as you go up in pitch, you'll drop from the fifth harmonic to the fourth, and then that will move out of range and you'll drop to the third harmonic, and that will move out of range and you'll come to the second harmonic. Again, the harmonics are moving out of range of F1 as the pitch rises. This brings us to the question, is there a bridge in chest voice? And the answer is yes. There is a bridge that you will actually feel from lower to upper chest. As the pitch rises and the harmonic that F1 is tuned to, as it drops from the fifth to the fourth to the third, well, the third to the second actually becomes enough of a change that you will feel it, and you will actually need to adjust the vowel a bit in order to facilitate it. Remember, as the fundamental rises, the space between the harmonics get greater. Now on the low notes, it's not that big a change, but by the time you get to where you're moving from the third to the second harmonic, they're starting to take bigger and bigger jumps. And you need, again, to readjust that vowel in order to help make that happen. So F1 on H3 is going to change to F1 H2. That means your throat, your first formant, rather than amplifying the third harmonic, that moves out of the range of that formant, of that resonator, and now you're boosting the second. This happens around B flat 3 in men and around E flat 4 in women. This gets kind of confusing for singers because I've seen so many vocal coaches define chest in men all the way up to E flat 4, and in women, chest is all the way up to the G or A flat 4. So the problem becomes this area from the B flat to the E flat in men, and from the E flat to the G or A flat in women. If you think of it simply as chest, and not a bridge that's moving you from lower to upper chest, you're going to experience problems. I've seen so many women struggling on F, F sharp, G before their bridge, and men struggling on middle C, C sharp, and D. What needs to happen is you need to help the formant move off of the third harmonic and onto the second. And we'll get into this more as we go on, but we need to lower that formant. And you lower it by rounding the vowel slightly, making the larynx drop a little, which deepens the vowel. Let's look at pulled chest. Pulled chest really is one of the biggest problems that faces singers, certainly beginning singers, because they get caught up in that yell mechanism and the body wants to hang on to it. What is pulled chest? Well, in terms of our formants and harmonics, it's F1, H2. The second harmonic is being boosted by the first formant, or the throat resonator. Now, we just talked about how we go from lower to upper chest by moving from the third harmonic to the second harmonic. And in upper chest, that's great. You've got that F1H2 tuning. The voice is really strong. Unfortunately, the nervous system doesn't want to let go of that. The reason being is that's where we yell. We are naturally good yellers. It's a survival mechanism. And so the nervous system will grab for that whenever it can. The strong pull has to really be worked out of our bodies through training, through vowel modification, through adjustment of these formants and harmonics. If for a little while you have to flip there, that's okay. But what we really want to do is we want to break this habit of yelling. This is what it looks like in Voce Vista. As you can see, we have the first, second harmonic. Now in upper chest, this boost of the second harmonic is great. But if this continues for men on, say, an F sharp 4, if women are trying to do this on a B4, you're just going to be really shouting. There may be times as a singer you want to do this on purpose, and that's fine if that's the sound that you want to get. You just want to be careful because a lot of damage can be done in this pulled chest condition. Mix. Mixed voice, some people call it cover, passaggio, blend, bridge. It really talks about the sensations that we feel as we have these shifting relationships of formants and harmonics. And when somebody says mix, what they're generally talking about is the dominant resonator, the first formant, being replaced by the second formant, F2. The throat resonator gives over to the mouth resonator in terms of which one is supplying the most energy, which one is tuning to the dominant harmonic and giving the voice its carrying power. Some people talk about this being a condition of split resonance. In other words, the resonance begins to change direction, and they'll talk about the resonance beginning to go behind the soft palate and behind the eyes. And certainly people can feel this, but does that really happen? No. By that definition, all resonance is essentially split resonance. We have two resonators that every sound wave has to travel through. It's being boosted by both resonators. It's just a question of which one is dominant. These feelings of sound splitting, going behind our soft palate, up behind our eyes, out the back of our head, these are all sensations caused by the sympathetic vibrations. We feel these, but that's not necessarily what is truly happening. And I hate for singers who've come to me and said, I really don't feel this, to feel like they're missing something. They're not. If you control the vowel and learn to make these shifts of resonance from F1 to F2, I don't care what you feel or how you describe it. You're doing something right. Now we come to head voice. Head voice is the second formant or the mouth resonator, F2, boosting the third, fourth, or even fifth harmonic, depending on the vowel. The second formant, or your mouth area, is great at boosting really high harmonics. That's why it's more like the tweeter. That's why it's the resonator we want to be dominant in the high notes. So much trouble comes from trying to stay in the throat as the dominant resonator beyond a certain point, or that pulled chest condition. Head voice gives us some different strategies for different vocal colors. You can tune this second formant to a higher harmonic as you ascend. You keep tracking this high harmonic, let's say the fifth harmonic, and you're going to get a really intense, bright sound. But you can actually shift it down to a lower harmonic and you're going to get a more rounded, more lyric sound. There's actually great color things that you can do through formant tuning in the head voice. Now, another one we'll talk about is female classical head voice. That's actually the first formant tuned to the first harmonic. Now, it sure doesn't feel like that. That kind of sound, that whoo, really feels like it's coming out the back of the head. But what it is the throat now is the main resonator again, but it is tuned to the fundamental or the first harmonic. Now that works very well up on high soprano operatic pitches because the fundamental is high enough that it's vibrating quickly enough that there's a lot of energy. But if you try and keep that approach on lower notes, it becomes very, very weak very, very quickly. You get that type of effect. There's not enough energy. It's not vibrating fast enough to carry, and also it doesn't give us enough chord closure. Remember, the energy of the harmonic will affect the chord's ability to hold back air. I just wanted to cover that and just show you what it is that female classical singers are doing. Now, some people talk about having no chest or weak chest. And what that is, it's kind of like what the female classical singer is doing. They've taken the first formant and they've tuned it to too low of a harmonic. Remember when we showed you in Voce Vista on a low note, the fifth harmonic was the one getting the boost. Well, if you drop down from that, rather than you start to get and it becomes weak very, very quickly. Flipping or cracking is another vocal issue, and what's happening there in terms of formant and harmonics is F1 suddenly drops from the second to the first harmonic. So what is happening is we are tracking the second harmonic with our first formant with our throat, and we're taking that too high. And at a certain point, it can no longer keep tracking the second harmonic. It's really moving out of its range. But if we don't move to the second formant as our dominant resonator, then what's going to happen is that the first formant is suddenly going to drop to the first harmonic, kind of that female classical tuning. That change of harmonics, that's a drop of an octave. And the change in vibrations is cut in half. So it suddenly becomes very weak. So the closed quotient is suddenly lowered, the CQ, and we'll talk about what that means. And what happens is the tone is radically changed. It suddenly becomes that more hollow falsetto type of sound. Harmonics and CQ, or closed quotient. The closed quotient, often abbreviated CQ, refers to the amount of time the chords are closed as opposed to open. If your chords are opening and closing 220 times a second on an A220, if during that process they're open more than they're closed, then you have a low closed quotient. And a low closed quotient gives a very weak or breathy sound. If you increase the percentage of time they stay closed, you have a higher closed quotient. You get more energy and sound. It's interesting to note that at 0% closed quotient, you have no sound, simply exhaling. And at 100%, you have no sound. The chords simply close over and don't allow air to escape. A higher harmonic will give you a higher closed quotient. They affect each other. A lower harmonic is going to give you a lower closed quotient. That's why when you're going for certain vocal colors and intensities, you want to be careful where you're tuning your formants. Unfinished sounds. Unfinished sounds are something that are used a lot in vocal training, and what they do is they attempt to isolate certain coordinations that we need to be able to build as singers, while eliminating or at least dialing down other coordinations. We're trying to simplify the process so we can focus on certain things. I want to show you what unfinished sounds are doing in terms of formant and harmonic relationships. Most unfinished sounds, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to stop the strong F1H2 connection from occurring. That F1H2 relationship, that upper chest, is the one that's so strong in the body that it really leads to human shouting. And so we need to train that out of the singer. So one of the unfinished sounds that's used a lot is a dopey sound, kind of like that. And what that does is it overlowers the F1. It causes you to drop the larynx so much that it never really couples up or boosts that second harmonic as you go into upper chest. So you're able to go from your chest through your bridge and into your head voice relatively easy. The other one that's often used is a Brady's sound, like a nay, nay, nay. That over-raises F1. That raises my larynx so high that, again, that strong F1H2 doesn't occur, and so I'm able to go from low to high without a lot of difficulty. Controlling formants. This is very important because as you go forward and begin to really get into advanced vowel work and vowel tuning and formant adjustment, these are the control mechanisms that you're going to use. You have your tongue, your lips, your jaw, and your larynx. These four parts of the body are what adjust the size and shape of the resonators. So they are what adjust the formant values. So they control which harmonics are being boosted and which ones aren't. I want to take a look at what happens to the formants as we adjust each of these elements. Lip rounding will lower both of the formants and give us subsequently a darker sound. It's a little more like that. Because both formants have dropped, they're now aligned with lower harmonics, and so it becomes a darker sound. On the other hand, if I widen my lips, that sound becomes brighter. Both formants have raised and aligned with higher harmonics. Dropping the jaw raises the first formant. This becomes important on higher notes because we do want the first formant to raise in order to still be involved as a resonator. We just don't necessarily want to do it by raising the larynx. And raising the larynx can often over-raise the first formant. So dropping the jaw is a good way to raise it without requiring a higher larynx. And speaking of the larynx, if we lower it, it drops the first formant. If we raise it, it raises the first formant. The larynx is a great way to control that. That's why we want to be careful as we approach the major transition that the larynx is not rising because it's hooked up to the second harmonic and therefore pulling chest. The tongue moving forward will lower the first formant and raise the second. The tongue moving back will raise the first formant and lower the second. Let's look at that. Here we have the tongue moving to an E position. So the tongue moves forward and high. The back of the tongue comes quite a bit forward. The back of the tongue is the acoustic separator between the first and the second formant, between the first chamber and the second chamber. So the mouth resonator has become rather small, so that formant is raised. Whereas the throat resonator has become longer, so that formant drops. Now when we go to an oo, the tongue comes back. Subsequently, the mouth resonator is now larger, so that formant has dropped. The second formant drops, whereas the throat resonator is now shorter, so that first formant rises. So the tongue is also a great way to balance these formants. In the next and final video, we're going to get into some practical application. We're going to look more closely at these controllers and how you can use them to adjust the formants and tune the vowels in your vocal exercises and your songs, and hopefully how you can use these concepts to improve your teaching as well. So I'll see you in the final video.